Okay, we are ready to set our shorts aside for a minute because it is waistband time. So what you need for this step is the 4 waistband pieces that we initially cut. You've got 2 without thread tracing and 2 with thread tracing. So we're going to treat each of these 2 as a pair now. Let's start with the ones without the thread tracing. These are going to become your waistband, while the other ones are going to become your waistband facing. So what we want to do is we want to find the side on each of them that has the 2 inches of seam allowance. And so you'll notice one side has a short amount of seam allowance, and then one side has a wide amount of seam allowance. We want to be pairing together the side with the wide amount of seam allowance. So go ahead, match them up, pin at the corners. We're just sewing this little short seam here. Short. Everything is short with this project. And you can pin it, and then we're going to stitch it. The reason why there is so much seam allowance back here is the same reason why there's so much seam allowance in the center back of our shorts. They actually match. It's because in the event that they ever needed to be let out theatrically, we want to make that easy on the people after us. And I'm pinning my line, and I'm going to repeat that. So this is my waistband. Whenever I say waistband, I mean the one without the basting, the hand thread tracing. When I mean waistband, or when I say waistband facing, I mean the one with the thread tracing. So I'm going to do the exact same thing to my waistband facing. I'm going to find the place where these match up. I'm going to pin through all the corners, all 2 of them, and they're an inch apart. And then I'm going to sew them. So we're making these into 1 or 2 bigger waistband pieces for ourselves, so that we can attach them, because we attach them as in one go. We don't attach it to half the shorts and then half the other half. So once you've got them pinned, head over to your sewing machine and stitch this seam. And we're stitching our waistband, just like I said we were going to. That's my facing done, and I'm going to do the exact same thing right now with my actual waistband. Okay. And now we've got 2 long pieces of waistband. One is a facing, and one is going to go onto the body of our shorts. We're going to start out our next steps, which is attaching the waistband by pressing our seams open. And I'm starting with the waistband, the one without the thread tracing on it. You'll want to do this on both of them. I'm just going to show you this one, because at this point, in just this project alone, you've pressed a few seams. You know what's up with pressing seams. Pressed it flat, pressed it open, I pressed it from the other side. And now I'm going to need my shorts. I've got my shorts and my waistband, and it is time to pin them together so that we can stitch the waistband to the shorts. So we're going to start by opening up our zipper. And actually, we want to start at the center back, because we've got a really clear mark on our waistband where the center back is. We are going to be... Yes. We're going to be pinning the bigger curved side to our top of our shorts. So your waistband has a curved shape. Think about the human body shape. You curve and you get smaller at your waist. So you want the smaller side facing up towards your waist. And so find the center back. You'll know it's the one with the really big 2-inch seam allowance. And we'll match up the seam of our waistband with that seam. And you want to make sure that really matches nicely, because you will see this from the outside. So I'm starting out by pinning that in place. Here we go. And then I'm going to eventually pin all the way around. So I'm going to... Yeah, I'll just show you. The ends, we pin the 2 ends differently. And there's not really a way for me to speed run show you things like that. Also, I prefer to stitch this from the short side out because we've got so many seam allowances and things in our way. So I'm actually going to pin mine so that I can sew from the short side down onto the waistband, because then I know that everything is lying flat. You could do it the other way. All I would say is if you're going to do that, be sure to really pin down your seam allowances so that they're lying flat. Pin down anything that could get caught if you're not looking at it. Because I don't like, for example, I want to make sure that my pocket seam allowance is lying the way pressed towards the back that it's currently not laying. So I'm going to flip it so that it's facing the correct direction and pin it down that way. And if I was sewing it from the other side, that could just happen. That could happen on my watch and I wouldn't even know it. That's sly pocket. Yeah, so anyway, that's why I'm doing it the way I'm doing it. If you're doing it the opposite way, also fine. Just be sure to pay attention so you don't have to redo things. You mean there's no one specific way to do sewing? Gasp. Although, frankly, in these shorts, there's a lot of things where I'm like, there actually is one specific way to do this, and it's a tailor pocket, so it's got 8 billion steps. But that's okay, because sometimes you can do things on your own way, and sometimes you do the most nonsensical pair of shorts that you've ever made in your life. So, all that said, it's time for me to explain to you the two sides being different on the waistband. So we've got an overlap on our shorts. That means that if we did the two sides of the waistband exactly the same, one of them there would be no place for our button to go. So on our overlap side, the side that's got the flap on the top, which is also the right side of the body, we want our zipper to end right where this fold ends, which conveniently, we've got this line. This line on our waistband, which I have marked in blue so you could really see it in the video, is indicating our center front. So it needs to match up to our thread tracing line, which on this piece, if you'll remember, was on the fold of our fabric. I took mine out already. You should have left yours in. So hopefully yours still exists. We're matching it up. I jumped the gun a little bit. I was like, yeah, I'm taking it out. I'm finishing it. And it's okay because I know where mine was and it was on that fold. And on the other side, I've got a residual piece of thread showing me where it was. So, right side, you line this line up right with the thread tracing, which is the edge of the fold. Easy enough. Then on the left side, we're going to start pinning again. And I'm just going to pretend I pinned all the way around to save you some time. So pin, 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 pin. We're here. So now we're trying to figure out what do we need to have happen with this side. Well, we've still got this nice blue line, and we've still got our thread tracing. You can see here's my little indicator where my thread tracing was. So we still want that blue line to match up with our thread tracing, which in this case is just to the right in this video of where the zipper is. And it'll be right next to where your zipper is, but not over your zipper. And now you'll still be thinking like, but then our waistband will stop right there. That's where we get you. Because when it comes time to sew our facing, we will actually make this part that sticks out is going to create a stand for our button to sit on. So it will be poking out in a little rectangle that will then, when we underlap it, there will be a place for our button. So for right now, all you need to know to do is match up your center front indicator with each of your thread tracing lines, and you'll be set up for success. I will explain more when we do the facing, because that's when things start to really matter. Now that we've got our waistband all pinned, it's time to sew. I am starting on the overlap right side of my shorts, so what I'm going to need to do is start all the way at the very edge of my fold that I've got here, because of where that blue line is. And so I'm going to start right here at the edge and scoot the camera, and then I'm going to stitch along my stitch lines, back stitching, sewing like there's no tomorrow. And I'm making sure that everything is lying flat as I sew.
Because this is one of those steps where it's very easy to accidentally get something caught. And then you gotta go back and fix it so that your shorts don't have a forever bubble. So, take your time while sewing on this step, making sure that things are gonna go under the presser foot completely flat. There we go. I'm gonna tuck this so it's all nicely arranged. On my seam allowance, you'll notice that we lose some of that stitch line, so I am just continuing in a straight line across where I was sewing before. If you're struggling with that, we can always mark that line back in. But the reason why it's not on there right now is because this was the right side, so it didn't have any lines on it to begin with. And stitching. There we go, and now we're back into comfortable sewing on the line territory. No more off-roading. Okay, this is my other pocket, and I want it to be facing the back, which is this way. This is, make sure that that your seam allowances are facing the right way, because otherwise, yeah, things will get wonky, your pocket will hang weird, and then you'll look less cool when you wear these shorts that fit no one. They might fit somebody. I've got people who are hopeful. I will be completely honest, I did try them on. And by try them on, I mean I, you know, did like a little shimmy and was like, nope, this is not happening, and called it a day. Okay, we've reached the end, so we need to remember where our blue line is again. It's marked by this pin on this one, so I can see that on my right side, or not the right side, the side I'm sewing on. So I'm going to stitch, and I'm actually going to stitch all the way to the edge of my zipper, and then back stitch. There we go. And so now I have got my initial waistband attached. Now it's time for us to go ham. And by that I mean go pressing ham. We're going to want to press our waistband up. We're not going to bother with pressing it open this time. It's going to want to sit up. That is how we want it. So I'm just skipping all the niceties and going straight to pressing it up on this ham. So I'm making sure that all the layers are laying nicely and pressing. The other thing is that this will be setting us up for a few steps from now when we want to encase our seam using a slip stitch, which will be the very near future in this video. You thought you were done with the slip stitch? Oh, the slip stitch never gets done. The slip stitch comes back all the time. But it's okay, it's not a problem for another couple of steps, because first, we need to have something that we can slip stitch. Ooh. I've got serger thread making an escape. Good for me. There we go. I'll clip that off later. And I have reached the edge of my shorts. So now I've got it all pressed up from the inside. It looks like this. All my seam allowances are facing the same direction. We luckily don't need to bother with serging this part because it's all going to get encased and hidden. And so that's pretty exciting. It'll be really nice for us. So now we are going to grab our waistband facing because it's time to attach that to our waistband. A waistband facing, or any facing, is a piece of fabric or a pattern piece that is cut in order to finish off an edge. So it conceals the raw edges. You can see these on jackets. You can see these on waistbands, obviously. A facing is a piece that we use to finish things off. So our waistband facing will ultimately serve to create a second piece of fabric that will fold over all of this and close it in so that it will look like a normal pair of shorts. Because your normal pair of shorts don't usually have like these visible layers, but they do have those layers in them. So for our facing, we're going to want to start by pinning, well, we're going to want to start with it pressed open. You know how I said I was going to do that off camera? Well, I lied. It didn't happen. It's happening now. Sometimes you set expectations and then you go film yourself sewing the waistband on instead of doing it. Okay, so we've got our waistband facing, we've got our shorts, and how we want to do this is we want to take the side that has the basting, the thread tracing, and we want to totally ignore it for right now because we're dealing with the other side. So we're wanting to pin the side without thread tracing to the top of our waistband. We're doing the exact same thing we did before. We're starting with matching up our center backs. And so find your center back of your original waistband, which is this right here, and we're going to match that seam up and pin it. And then repeat the process we did earlier with pinning it all the way around. This one, it does not matter if you sew from the short side or the other side because there's just so many less things to get in our way. We're not running over pockets, we're not running over front seam, side seam, back seam. We got one back seam and that's it. So I'm just doing it from the facing side because that was the side I was holding towards me. Okay. And so I'm pinning. And when I reach the end, that is where we're going to apply some of those things we talked about earlier. Which was that the two sides are going to be different and they're going to fit together kind of like a puzzle. And that one goes underneath and one goes on top. So, I mean, like a really weird puzzle. So we've reached the edge of this, our right side, which has it goes over the top. So this is the side that we want to finish right on this edge. Yes, right on the edge of our fold. And so what we want to do is we want to line up our blue line with the blue line on the other side and pin it. And we're going to stitch on that line when it comes time for us to sew this instead of just pinning it. So at the next step, we're going to sew whoop, whoop, and all the way around. We'll eventually clip off all of this extra. This is here because we need it on the other side. So now I'm going to continue pinning. If you want, you're welcome to skip forward to the part where I reach the other end. But because this shouldn't take that long, I'm just going to show it. Yeah. But yeah, so facings, they're a strange little thing that if you're not in clothing construction, if you don't do clothing construction or costume construction or something similar, you might not know about them because they're just like part of your clothes. But they're the bits that keep all the raw edges from showing when we're not doing a full lining. When we are doing a full lining, sometimes they're the bits that keep you from seeing the lining. So on a vest, for example, you might have part of the front done as a facing in the outside fabric so that if it like flips open a little bit, you see the outside fabric on the inside and go, oh, it's made of that the whole way through. When in fact it is made of a much cheaper lining fabric the rest of the way. So it's all about pretending we're richer than we are. And I think that's beautiful. So with this one, you've got our blue line, and we do want those to match up, but more importantly, what we're going to be stitching on is this line all the way out here. We're actually using our exterior stitch line. So match those up. And this is how we're going to create that button stand for ourselves. So when we flip this around, we're going to have a neat little part where our shorts goes doot, 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 and we can put a button right there. And so that will serve to when we overlap it, we'll have something for the shorts to be able to have a button on. So once you've got this all pinned, we're going to head over to our sewing machine. It's time to sew our waistband facing on. So what I'm doing to start out is I'm actually going to start with the side, the overlap side that needs to line right up with this fold. And so all I'm going to be doing is first this seam allowance is pressed up. I want to pull it down so that I want to sew through this part too. And so I'm actually going to stick one more pin in it to really make sure that I've got everything laying flat. Now that I'm over here, I'm like, oh, well, that would be helpful. Okay, so now I'm going to sew on my blue line here. I'm making sure everything is laying flat. I'm going through just the layers of the waistband and waistband facing. Back stitching, following the blue line. I'm gonna stitch all the way off. Clip. We could pivot. We could do the pivot thing on this one. It is going to be, I think, easier to just clip and start over again. So now we've got this corner done. It's time to sew the main top part of our waistband facing. So starting at the stitch line we just created, we're going to sew along our pencil line. And actually, I'm going to stop and flip mine over so that I've got it on the side where all the pins are, because I was setting myself up for a lot of struggles in the near future. Actually, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do both the ends first. Yes, I pinned it as if I was going to be doing the other end. So we're doing both the ends first, and then we'll sew the top, and it'll be just fine and dandy. And I'm going to pin this other end, and so this is the end. This is our underlap end. We're going to sew this line instead of the blue line. So we're creating that little pocket, rectangular, not pocket. We're creating that little rectangular pop out piece. I can't say pocket. We've got pockets. We already did that. We're done with that step. So I'm going to stitch this. And again, just going right off the edge is going to save us some grief. And then I'm going to lift everything up and start stitching the top of my waistband to my waistband facing. So I'm going to lay everything flat. I've got my shorts extending out to the left of me, and I'm sewing. Back stitching there at my stitch line that I created just before this. And then I'm going to pull my pins out as I go. This is why I had to flip, is because of the way I pinned it to be really, really nice, going only this direction. And it would be really annoying any other way because I've made my pins so that I, as a right-handed person, can easily pull them out. If you're ever curious about how I pin things and to make things really sturdy, stable, and also easy to sew with, let me know in class, and I am happy to share my secret hard-won pinning wisdom. I've worked with a lot of people who do it a lot of different ways, and I have found that the way I do it is the way for me, and there's a different way for everybody who sews. Honestly, there's so many ways to do it. So if you're interested in trying something the Abby Hagen trademark way, and by that I mean I did not come up with it, it's not the Abby Hagen trademark way, but you know, the way I do it, let me know. I kind of alternate pins that are like straight along the seam line, like the one I just pulled out, and ones that are perpendicular to it, and I put the perpendicular ones in first. That's the whole thing. See, I was like, ask me, and then I just, spoiler alert, told you. And the reason for that is it makes sure that our stitch line is, first the perpendicular ones help to place the stitch line correctly, and then the parallel ones, the ones that run right along the seam line, help to really enforce that it's not slipping around. And I've reached the end, I've reached my line there, so I'm going to backstitch. Lift my foot up, clip my threads off, make sure that everything got stitched without catching anything, and it looks like we're good. There's no weird tucks. And so now we're ready to head over to the iron for some, no, we're doing one more sewing step. We're ready to do a sewing step, and then we're gonna head over the iron. For our next step, which is we're doing it before we go over and press, we're going to do something called understitching, which we haven't done in this class before, but it's a special sewing technique that we use sometimes when making garments, which is really nifty and cool. And so all we're doing is we're going to, we can't go all the way to the corner because there's corner in the way, but starting about an inch away from your corner, away from that whole mess, where you can first start getting things to lay flat, what I want you to do is we're going to do understitching. And what that is I want you to have your seam allowance together, both sides of it, so I got both sides of it off to the right, and I'm going to put my machine presser foot down, and we're just trying to stitch as close to the edge without going over, on the side of the waistband facing. So this is a type of top stitching, understitching is, and this will create a line of stitching that's not going to be visible from the outside because it is on our facing side. And what it does is it makes the seam automatically roll, like the visible part of the seam roll to the back and really perks up the outside of the seam. We see this a lot on formal dresses, like necklines. If you ever see that there's a little line of stitching behind the neckline, that is put in place, that is understitching, and that is put in place to hold the neckline up and be nice and well, clean, defined, not seeing our seam line on the outside. So yes, just push all of your seam allowance to your right side, and then stitch on top of it through all of the seam allowance layers and through the facing layer. The first time I had to understitch something, I was like, I cannot think of a more pointless step. And then as soon as I went over to iron it, I was like, I would like to rescind my previous statement. It is not pointless. It is good. Okay, and we're reaching the other corner, so we're going to have to stop again once we get to about an inch away. As soon as things start to try to curl up on you, we stop, because we don't need to go all the way to the corner. That is okay. It would be too tricky and possibly not possible. I think it might not work. So I've reached here. I'm going to backstitch. I'm going to take my whole thing over to the iron now so that we can really marvel in the wonder of understitching. But as you can see already, it's helping everything to lay exactly nicely as a waistband. It's helping us to get that crisp line instead of fighting with the iron and still never quite getting it. Understitching, it's the best.
For our next step, you're going to need some scissors, and then ultimately the iron and the ham as well. But right now we're starting out with some seam grading. This is just like what we did on our pockets. We did this on our pockets. We did this on, I think at some point on our bag project, but that's history to me now. We're above that. We've moved on. So what we're going to do for grading our seam is we want to trim our facing side to be 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then we want to trim our other side to be 1/8 of an inch longer than that. So 3/8 of an inch. And I need to not look at the camera while I'm doing this because that is going to make me completely miss the mark. You are welcome to, if you want to use a ruler, to initially start yourself off at cutting at 1/4 inch. It does not need to be, laser precise. We are just trying to clip it down. And the reason why we're doing this at 2 different lengths is to create a stair-step effect, which makes the seam allowance lie smoother within the waistband. There's a point to everything we do, and if you're ever like, why are we doing this? Just ask me. I'm happy to explain why we do some things, especially with these shorts. I feel like there are a lot of steps where you have room to go, why? Why are we doing this? Why is it like this? And there's an answer to all of those, which is really cool. Because we do things a certain way so that they turn out a certain way. It's funny, usually I don't have this problem when videoing, but it's for some reason when I'm trying to grade seams or clip something on camera, I'm like, ooh, I should watch the camera version of myself do this, and that is too disorienting. That makes me want to fall over and also cut through the fabric of my shorts. Okay, and when I reach this seam allowance, I'm making sure that I'm not going through that because it is kind of in my way. So I don't want to be clipping through that layer. And I'm just going to show you half of this, and then I will pause the video and go to the next step. So I've clipped the 1/4 inch roughly on the waistband facing side. On the waistband side, now I need to trim it to be just a little bit longer. And so I can use my other side as my guideline. And right here, I apparently got kind of wild. I'm going to trim that back down. I'm using my other side as my guideline to know that I'm just trimming it to be just a little longer than the facing side. And so finish this process all the way around the waistband, and then you're ready to press. Next, after we've graded all of our seams, we want to clip the corners of our waistband and our waistband facing. We're also going to trim down the seam allowance here because we on the overlap side only, because we've got a ton extra and we don't need it anymore. So I'm trimming it to about 1/2 inch. Boop. And then what I'm going to do for the corner is I'm just going to clip right across it.
And this will help it to be pointier when we go to flip it. And I'm going to find my other corner, and I'm going to do the same, almost the same thing. I'm not trimming down my seam allowance near so much, but I am going to clip the corner. Boop. And I think I will trim this down to be closer to a 1/2 inch. And then we're ready to flip our waistband out and do some pressing. So start by flipping out the corner parts, and you'll want to grab a point turner. We've got some in the costume shop, and also I believe there's at least one in the lab that you can use. They are usually white plastic. Mine is really vintage, so it is brown plastic. It's also a button gauge, apparently, which I've never once used it for that, but that would be exciting to find out. If I ever need a button gauge, I could use it. And I'm poking this corner out, and you want to be gentle when you're using a point turner, because if you really put all of your gusto and your stabbing power into it, it will just go right out the seam. It'll break the seam. So be gently forceful is what I will say. You gotta do it with conviction, but you also don't want to poke right out the beautiful seam that you just sewed, because you'll have to flip it out and fix it again. And now we're going to press it on our ham. And the reason why we're using our ham at this point is because this is a curved seam, and hams are specifically designed to press curves around. And I'm going to pay special attention to my corner, making sure that it's nice and pressed out. And then once we're done with this step, I'm going to show you really quick the results of all of our special our special planning for our waistband over and underlap. I think visually the combo of this ham with these shorts might be my new aesthetic. Might be the new trend sweeping the nation by next summer. So I hope you're all ready for combo plaid mixing with no overlapping colors. They are completely different color sets. There's like we got red, we got blue, we got yellow, and then we got pink, green, orange. I think it's kind of nauseating in a fun way. All my fashion students, just so you know, I think that's my trend forecast, and I would really recommend you guys get up on the violent plaid mixing, is what I'm going to call it. That's what your textbook will call it in a couple of years when they are studying my revolution of the fashion culture, is violent plaid mixing. It's going to lead to movements in other violent pattern mixing that will really define the 2020 to 2030 fashion decade. I hope this ages well. I hope that people watch that and go, wow, she was absolutely nuts. Okay. So really quick, before we move on to our next step, which is we're going to be flipping up this waistband facing on the edge we sewed, here is a preview of what our waistband is going to do. Is you've got this part, which will have a buttonhole on it, and this back part, which will have a button. So then we'll be able to close up our waistband at the top, and you'll look so tidy and put together with your little shorts. So that is just a sneak preview of a step to come in the future, and also explaining why we did what we did, so that you're not endlessly confused. I think there's got to be a little confusion, because you got to just believe, you know? Sometimes you got to believe in yourself. For our next step, what we want to do is we want to fold our fabric up, our waistband facing up along our hand thread tracing line that we made before, the blue thread you're seeing here on my video. So you want to fold that up and press it and then pin it into place. At the corners, what this is going to look like is you're going to tuck up both bottom side. Here, I'll just do it again. You've got the bottom, you've got it on two sides because it's got a seam here. I'm going to flip them both in and kind of tuck them with my finger and try to roll them until I've got the blue thread on the edge. And then I'm going to pin them in place, because our next step is going to be hand slip stitching our waistband facing down. And so you're going to want to do a fold and press and pin combo. So I'm folding, I'm pressing, and then I'm going to pin. And we want our folded edge, where we want to put it is we want to put it to lay just on top of that stitching line that is connecting our waistband to our shorts. This means that we're covering up all of the stitching, all of the inside hidden mechanics of how the shorts get to work from the view of the outside world. We're hiding it all away inside our neat little waistband facing, which is what facings do. They polish the edge, they make it look nice, they conceal any raw edges in this case, and make it so that it's got, if you're wearing these, it would be a lot more comfortable to have a waistband that is just a piece of fabric instead of a whole bunch of little ends. It'd be like the equivalent of having a stack of 4 small itchy tags sewn into the waistband of your pants all the way around, which is not my idea of a good pair of shorts. I don't know about you guys. And so I'm just going to continue this, and I think I will skip to the last corner, so I will show you that. You're going to want to go ahead and pin all the way around, and then I will show you a bit of the hand slip stitching. And we're so close to being done with these shorts, guys. There are, after this step, there were 2 major step categories left, and that is, we need a button/buttonhole, and we need a hem. And then we're done. You're done with things that you have to do for this class. You can turn your shorts into me, and I will be just gleeful as I grade them. Whenever I grade student projects, I get so excited. Recently, for people who are in some way affiliated with Kent State who've taken this class, I was grading some student projects for a theoretical design for a class that is not this one, and I just loved it. It was so exciting, so fun to see all the, like, it was the play Romeo and Juliet, and you could do whatever you wanted, you just had to justify what you did. And let me tell you, the kids are all right. They're making cool, interesting choices, and I want to see all of those shows. I've never been more entertained for free. Let me tell you, it was like being at a movie, except for I was grading things. Yep. Okay. So I pinned that corner. You saw how I did that corner. I kind of got caught up in the monologue there a little bit. Let me go back and show you how I did that corner, and then I'm going to pause this and pin the rest of it on my own. So what my corner looks like is it goes straight up into the waistband, and so I just flipped. This one was easier than the other one. I just flipped the seam allowance up and under, and it's funny because it wants to do that. It wants to be that way. And then I pinned it. There we go. So go ahead, finish pinning it, and then we're ready to slip stitch. I'm ready to start my slip stitching, and so I need a needle threaded with a color that matches my shorts. I'm using my pink that I've been using the whole time, and you're going to want it to have a knot tied to just one end of your thread. So I have, there it is. I've tied a knot in one end of my thread because we don't want a double threaded needle for this. When you're doing a slip stitch, it just adds bulk and more opportunities for it to show up in a place where we don't want it to. Okay, so I'm going to show you how I'm getting started, and then I'll probably cut to me doing the very end corner because the corners are a little different. So starting out, we've done a slip stitch before. You've done a slip stitch multiple times before in this class. We did our sampler. We also closed up the bottom of our bag with a slip stitch. So it's the one where you go back and forth inside a tunnel. So I'm starting by going through the fold of one of my 2 edges, and then I'm going to pop over to the other fold and go through it. And so I'm just coming out, whoop, and popping over back to the first side. I'm going to pull my pin out because it's in the way now, visually at least. And I want to make sure that everything is staying right on that edge that I wanted it to be folded on. So popping over, whoop, going through the fold and pulling it out. So when I'm doing the little flappy bit, I've got 2 folds. Once we get off of that bit, it is going to be just like we did with our sampler, where we are working with one edge that has a crease, one edge with a tunnel for us to go through, and then an edge that is just flat fabric. So we're reaching that point now. So what I'm going to do then is once I come out of the tunnel like I am right now,
I'm going to grab a little bite of fabric, a small prick because we don't want it showing up on the outside. In this case, I'm grabbing a small prick of my zipper, which is a little tough, but that's only for this like one here and maybe one more at the very end. Here we go. And I'm pulling it so that it's nice and taut. And then I'm going back up into the fold. And so I'm coming back into the fold right in line with where I just came out of my prick stitch, or my little prick that I've sewn, because that gives us the least amount of visible thread, which is our goal. We want it to look nice from both the inside and the outside. So again, I've come out of the tunnel, grabbing a bite of fabric, whoop, pulling it all the way through, immediately going back up, straight up where I came out. Well, not where I came out, but straight up in line with where I just finished sewing. This will limit the bunny ear effect where you're seeing your stitch on the slip stitch that I see a lot. Because that comes in where you do a lot of moving that isn't inside the fold, which is not what we want. The only time we're moving is when we're in the fold. So I'm not going forward outside of the fold beyond like a tiny prick of fabric. Okay, up in the tunnel, out, grab a bite of fabric, pull it, and then back up into the tunnel, right where I just left off. And so you're going to repeat this around once you reach the other corner. Oh, I'm not going to show you the other corner. I will just talk you through it right now, because the other corner is just a continuation of what we've done. You'll just keep slip stitching the exact same way of going through this tunnel, grabbing a bite out on your body side of your fabric, and then going back into the tunnel and then tie it off somewhere around this little corner. That's all there is to it. So go ahead, pause this video. If you need a more in-depth tutorial on the slip stitch, you can go back and watch that video. But this was just a quick, here's how we're doing it on this project.